Sage Wanderer here, coming at you from my van down by the river. And we've been talking about the weaponization of music and the 432 versus 440 hertz tuning conspiracy. Don. I think I covered it pretty clearly and explained it in episode 1. So if you haven't seen episode 1, you might want to hop back over there. But I wanted to start off this video by telling you a story from my life. Now, as many of you know, I'm a professional musician, retired now. Many of you know that I was a child prodigy and kind of got a download from God on how to make music. With it came an understanding of the power of music as well. That part of my download was understanding that being able to make someone feel something with music was a serious responsibility. It was like a superpower. I had no question as to whether it existed because I could see it when my hands crossed the keyboard, that listeners felt something. If you'd like to hear me improvise original music, then you can go to my My Music playlist, which is not music that I like, it's music that I have performed and videos of me playing. I also do satirical videos, but if you want to hear me play the piano and improv original music on the spot for the camera, you can go see that there. And you'll know that I understand that transmission of emotion and spirituality that occurs when I make music. And I would argue that I've had zero difference in the spiritual side of the music that I perform at A440 versus any other tuning. That when I started making music in church and doing praise and worship music and seeing my own original music touch people, and seeing how that I could improvise and make people feel things, lead people down roads of emotional pathways, take you on a trip, an emotional trip. And I saw the power of being able to do that. And at that time, who knows what our pitch was? This was before electronic tuners. You know, people want to make a big deal about standardizing the tuning of instruments, but musicians who went in the studio, musicians who made records, if you go back and look at the old records, they're all over the place. They're 430, they're 435, they're 446. In some of those records from the 50s and 60s, you got to go back and retune to play along with every one. Guitar players know this. They're not all the same until the advent of the electronic tuner, which gave us all something to tune to. By then, A440 was the established pitch. So I have played music and experienced the supernatural effect of music on people. In situations where the tuning was who knows where, and where it's at A440. And I've noticed no difference. I've seen miracles happen in many pitches. Case in point, at A440, I was part of a large praise and worship group, and I was not the primary piano player. The primary piano player was leading the praise and worship and singing, and I was providing secondary keyboard sounds. And we were doing a extended praise and worship service. It was 2 hours of praise and worship and nothing more. And so things get repetitive. And, you know, you're linking songs together in medleys live on the spot with little or no direction from the leader. And you all start to think on the same wavelength. And you all start to get inside each other's heads. And you all start to be able to seemingly read each other's mind. You're connected by the Spirit with one another in these situations, and you start to flow in and out of the songs and from one song to another. And I began to kind of lose myself in this music during this service, and this one service in particular. And I started feeling like I just kind of randomly knew to make changes to my keyboard system. So I was using 2 keyboards, you stacked on top of each other, and a third module, which was just a sound module. So got 2 keyboards that have sounds, and a third one, and I was mixing them and choosing sounds and changing sounds on the fly and mixing them while I'm playing to produce all these different soundscapes and background sounds. And a lot of it was based in, you know, synth sounds and string pads and oohs and ahs, and this deep, lush, swirling kind of sound started to build. And I started pumping my sustain pedal. I had one for each keyboard, and I was triggering different notes, and I was completely in the spirit. And this sound started coming from my keyboard that I didn't think it was capable of. I was combining the sounds of the 3 keyboards into something completely different, into some hierarchy sound that was like something I was creating live while the music was happening. And it just, the Spirit of God built, and the Holy Spirit fell on the place, and people experienced miracles and healings, we found out afterwards, that happened during the service. And when it was over, and I was exhausted and spent from this 2 hours of being a conduit for the Spirit of God, people rushed the stage. They went right past the praise and worship leader straight to me. Some of them had been talking to each other in the corners, and some others joined from various parts of the room, until about 8 or 10 people were standing there before me. And they were all saying the same thing. I heard angels singing through your keyboard. How did you make that sound? Can you make that sound again? Do you have angels on your keyboard? That didn't sound like electronics. It sounded like angels were singing. And other people saying, "Amen, brother. I heard angels coming from it was in the whole room." The whole spiritual essence of the room changed when those sounds started coming from the keyboard. Oh yes, I believe music was powerful. I just don't buy into the 432 thing, and here's why. Here's why pitch don't matter. Because 432 hertz versus 440 hertz are random. That's a random, arbitrary number. Let me explain. Humans invented the 1 second increment of time. That whether it's 440 cycles per second or 432 cycles per second, it's only the numerologists who are involved in the occult and numerological occultic meanings that 432 means anything to. It wouldn't surprise me if they'd changed it to 432 to begin with. That the whole reason they tried to make it 432 was because that number matches their esoteric, spiritualist, numerological coincidences and serendipities. Now, a lot is made out of a thing called the Schumann resonance. And the thing about the Schumann resonance is that a lot of people that are behind this 432 versus 440 controversy or conspiracy, a lot of them will reference the Schumann resonance. Well, what is the Schumann resonance? Essentially, the earth is making sounds. Some people call this the rhythm or the heartbeat of the earth. It's different than the syncopated pattern I offered you from the trees, the beat of the earth of the trees. This is a musical vibrating frequency, okay? And there are several peaks that are called Schumann resonances, or places where this sound peaks. And they've ignored all of the 5 or 6 different, or there's 7 different Schumann peaks, and they've zeroed in on the one that many people say is 8. And so they say 8 is, if you roll that out, it becomes A432. See, A432 is the sound of the earth. It's the sound of nature. This is a magic frequency. It's a magic frequency, Kenneth. It's a magic frequency. But what if a second were a second and a half? Let me get back to the Schumann frequency. So 7.8 is the actual Schumann frequency, and people round it up to 8 to make it fit into the 432 conspiracy. But when you have 7.8 and you extrapolate it out, you don't get A432, you get A417. You only get A432 when you round it up to 8. So it's an imprecise, incorrect assumption that A432 has anything to do with the resonance of the earth, because it just doesn't. A417 is more close related to the resonance sound that the earth is making, okay? And that's just one of the 7 frequencies that the earth is making. Make sense? So, back to this arbitrary number. So the numerologists are the ones that have glommed on to 432, and they'll say, well, 432 is divisible by 12, to where we're 12 disciples, 12 months in the year, 12 tribes of Israel. There's all these 12 things. So 12 is important, and it's divisible by 12, and 440 is not. You get the .6666667 when you try to divide 440 by 12. That's great, but what's that got to do with the price of tea in China? Because let me explain something. A second is arbitrary. What if a second were a second and a half? Now what would the numbers be? What would the numerology be on that? How did we decide 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi is a second? You see, the numbers don't matter. It's the emotion in the music. It's the connection between the notes. The distance between the note you start on and the next one you choose. Those are what unlocks the human spirit. Those are what we call songs. Those are what we call riffs. Those are what we call chops. Being able to arrange those waterfall connecting equidistant tones, regardless of where they start. It doesn't matter where they start. It doesn't matter what you're tuned to. It's not the frequency. It's the intervals. It's the intervals that affect the human psyche, that open you up to emotion, that can help you contact God, or can open you up to the powers of the dark side. Is there anything to 432? Well, I did notice that a lot of the Hindu and people that do meditation have glommed onto this 432, and they're producing 432 videos of meditation. And I think I couldn't find anything that kind of predates this new conspiracy theory, so there's no really like attention to what frequencies people are ohming at. That ohming, I'm talking about chanting Om, Om, which that one right there is a lot higher than A440. But, those frequencies vary. A person who's bigger, with a bigger chest, might have a deeper Om. So, but now they're tying those to frequencies and trying to sell that the frequency of the Om sound you make is somehow important and opens up things. And it does remind me of the drone tone from music that was by indigenous people, that was designed to put you into some kind of musical trance, that they had the drone tone. You see it in bagpipes. How many people like bagpipe music? Nobody likes well, the drone tone is when one tone stays constant and all the other tones play around it, and there's really no change in chord, and it sounds like, and you have all these other, I can't because I only have one voice box, but there were all these other notes going on, but there's the one drone tone throughout. The bagpipes do that, the didgeridoo's instrument that does that. A lot of indigenous tribal peoples have this drone tone. And there may be something to a drone tone, but is that going to be at A432 versus A440? I promise you, A432 versus A440 is imperceptible by people who even have golden ears, people who have perfect pitch. Can't tell A432 from A440 out of the clear blue sky. I defy you to produce a blind test where you don't know what you're listening to, whether it's A432 or A440, and I don't care how great you think your ear is, you'll never guess them. You'll be right half the time, because that's the odds. You got a 50-50 chance of getting that one right, because you're not going to get anything from that music. Let me tell you, it's imperceptible. That's why you won't find any blind sound tests of people who don't know what they're listening to trying to guess whether it's 432 or 440. What matters is the intervals. What matters is a great hook. What matters is a musician who's ready to pour out his heart on that guitar or pour out his heart on that piano. Someone that's willing to let the Spirit of God come through his gift. One who's willing to share himself in an unselfish and open way musically. That's what moves hearts. That's what music is about. And it don't matter how you tune your guitar. And that's my opinion from down by the river.